Hello everyone, this is Leah Whitehorse, and in this recording I'm going to be looking at the astrology of July 2023. So before I go into talking about the month ahead, I actually wanted to just check in with some of the things that have been happening out there in the world and how they are relating to the astrology of our times. I've been very interested in Pluto's foreshadowing. So what I mean by this is, as I'm actually recording this at the beginning of June 2023. So at this moment in time, Pluto is still on the 0 degrees of Aquarius. And I'm really seeing a lot of news stories that are really telling us about how things may manifest going forwards. For an example, the really big one in the last few days has been that there's been a big story, a sort of whistleblower story that has suggested that the US and maybe other countries as well have alien spacecrafts in their possession, possibly around 12 different types or 12 different machines. And whatever the actual story is there, certainly something is going on. Some secrets are coming out. And yes, of course, we've had this over the years. We've had this since Roswell. But it seems like this is being taken a lot more seriously. I actually found this particular article in The Guardian in the UK, which is considered to be a very serious newspaper with good journalism. So something is going on, and the US government is being urged to come clean about what is happening. So certainly Pluto going into Aquarius, and later down the line Uranus going into Gemini and forming a trine to Pluto in Aquarius. I talked about this in my Pluto in Aquarius video, where I said that there may well be something about communication from or with alien entities of some kind. It's the thing that could certainly change us irrevocably for the future, to change society, to change humanity, Pluto in Aquarius. So that was one story. There was also another story that was headlined the possible internet apocalypse that could happen in the next decade. So this is to do with solar winds and how they can affect our power systems and electrical systems, the power grids. So this is something that is concerning NASA. So they're doing some experiments, they're doing some research into this. And again, the idea of the internet being something that is connected to Aquarius. Pluto, of course, is connected to the idea of the apocalypse because it has the tendency to raise things to the ground. So it's another little clue of a possibility of things to come. The other thing that was in the news that is not specifically to do with Pluto, but certainly has a connection to Saturn in Pisces, is the destruction of the dam in Ukraine. And I actually said in my Saturn in Pisces video that there might be something about the creation of a dam, and then I immediately talked about, or it could be the opposite, and there could be some kind of mass flooding. And obviously this situation in Ukraine has caused a huge ecological disaster. It's causing, of course, a huge humane disaster. So a lot of the stuff that's going on right now feels incredibly intense. It feels very scary. As we come into July itself, Pluto will have moved back onto that 29 degrees of Capricorn. It's gone back into Capricorn. It's hanging out on that anaretic degree. A reminder of that Sabian symbol is a secret meeting of men responsible for executive decisions in world affairs. As I'm recording this, the news is just coming out today, 9th of June 2023, that Donald Trump has been criminally charged again regarding secret papers resonant with this anaretic degree of Capricorn. So it's begun as Pluto was in Aquarius, this is when the papers to him were served to charge him. But as Pluto creeps back into Capricorn and goes back onto that anaretic degree, we are once again seeing these stories about how those who have held power in corrupt ways and the general corruption at the top, not just Trump, there's a whole bunch of people at the top that have been misusing their power to maintain authority. And this is going to change. Pluto is going to see to it that handling of power is better managed for the future. And just briefly looking at Donald Trump's chart, I noted that he is going to have quite a sort of collection of aspects next year, particularly Uranus conjunct his midheaven. He's also going to have Uranus square to his natal Mars. And that's quite a tense aspect anyway. It can sort of bring some shocks and surprises. And Uranus is the ruler of his 7th house and Mars is the ruler of his 9th house. 9th house is to do with law, and also the 7th house is to do with justice. So we've got some kind of shocks coming around Donald Trump, or he has some shocks coming. Maybe he's going to deliver us some shocks. Who knows? One thing for sure, with Uranus going over his midheaven as things move forwards, there's going to be some significant changes in his public image. The midheaven is kind of what we aspire to and who we are out there in the world. So maybe there's going to be a significant shift in his public image as we move through time. Now, moving into July itself, I wanted to talk about all of this because we're already in this very tense picture, and July really brings things to quite a critical peak. We've recently had a very strong period of time where we had a T-square between Jupiter and Pluto and Mars. And now this month, we're going to have the Sun opposite to Pluto, both of them squaring the nodes. So specifically Pluto square to the nodes in itself is a pretty tense picture. But with the Sun also kind of connecting with this and all of these on the anaretic degrees, it feels like there is an enormous struggle, like a huge karmic story that is playing out on the world stage that is affecting us personally and maybe changing the way that we see ourselves, or maybe changing the way that we see the world. So some very intense stories coming out during July. I also should say as well that as we come into the month, Venus will be in the shadow of her upcoming retrograde period. So that's also another story that is slowly coming into view. Now, on the 3rd of July, we begin the month with a full moon in Capricorn. So this in itself is going to illuminate issues connected with authorities, responsibilities, our career, how stable things are, how we feel the structures of our lives are working or not working. So there may be a sense of emotional weight with the moon being in Capricorn, but there is going to be a nice connection to Jupiter. So we have a trine over there to Jupiter in Taurus now. And that is going to help us, I feel, to see that there are possibilities for growth, for slow growth, and that we can re-secure ourselves if we're feeling insecure, and we can find ways to move past some of these limitations that we are becoming aware of. So there is an opportunity for growth despite the limitations that we are sensing or seeing. I will be doing a reading for this lunation over on my Patreon, where I will look at this chart far more in depth. But that is the main theme of this lunation. On the back of the full moon in hard-working Capricorn, we then have Mars moving into Virgo. So this is going to be on the 10th of July. So this is a transit that activates, because that's what Mars does, he activates a desire to make things better, to see improvements. Again, hard working. Virgo is an earth sign. It's super practical. It's connected with our daily life. It's also connected with our health. So we're motivated to take care of things in better ways. Maybe we're making new goals around our health or around our work. Maybe it's just seeing, what can I do? And recognizing that doing even small things, and this is Virgo that loves to pay attention to details, even small goals, small actions can have a big effect. They can have a positive effect. So Mars in Virgo is positively encouraging us to pay attention to details, make a few tweaks. Small actions will help us to make significant changes later down the line. This is also about honing our skills. Whenever I see Mars going into Virgo, I get a sound in my mind. I have a certain level of synesthesia. So sometimes I read certain words or look at certain colours and they are accompanied by certain types of sounds. So for me, the sound that I get in my head when I see Mars going into Virgo is that sound that a blade makes when it's being sharpened, when you're drawing that blade across the stone. And it's very methodical, it's very rhythmic. And that's how Mars in Virgo seems to be for me, that you're sharpening everything up. You're sharpening your reflexes, you're sharpening your perceptions, and you're sharpening your skills. So I think this can be a really productive transit. The only downside, I think, to Mars in Virgo is that we can be inclined to overwork, to try to burn the candle at both ends, again, because we're trying to make things better. We're trying to get organized. We're trying to get healthy. And so we're sort of pushing the boat out a bit more than we would normally, or we're working longer hours than we would normally. And doing a little bit of that sometimes is not a bad thing. But if we try to do it too much, if we keep pushing ourselves, then we can suffer from burnout. So that's the thing to be aware of with Mars going into Virgo. On the 11th of July, Mercury is going to enter Leo. So this changes the way that we are communicating with one another. So Leo is confident. Leo is fiery, exuberant. It is bright. It wants to be seen. It wants to be heard. So it raises our voices. It allows us to project our voices out there in the world. It encourages us to do this, especially creatively. Your creative voice gets a boost with Mercury going into Leo. And we can also be a bit more assertive in how we're talking to one another and be more willing to take a risk to express our ideas. These are also great ways of using Mercury in Leo. It can also be really good for talking to children as well. So being able to communicate with the kids on a better level, because your mind can conceive more easily of that creative, wonderful world that children tend to live in. So Mercury going into Leo can also ask us to think about these kinds of things as well, to think about how we want to express ourselves on a creative level, to think about how we want to bring up our children and what we want to teach our children, how our children are being taught to use their minds and how they are being taught in how to communicate with one another. So Mercury in Leo is also useful for these kinds of conversations. Now, the downside with Mercury in Leo is that because Leo loves to be seen and heard and be the one who is center stage, sometimes it means that it's harder to make room for every voice. It's almost like only one person can be speaking here, and that's me. So yes, sometimes we might come across these kinds of situations where someone else is not allowing us to get a word in edgeways, or maybe it's even us that's sort of really wanting to get the point across so much to someone else that we're struggling to see the cues for when to stop speaking speaking and allow the other person their say at that moment. So yes, Mercury in Leo can have its downsides as well, but generally I think it's quite a useful transit because mentally it's like quite a bright and lightening influence because Leo is ruled by the sun. So it helps to bring clarity to the mind. Whereas before, whilst Mercury was in Cancer, we might have found that a lot of our thinking was muddled by our feelings. And Mercury in Leo finds it much more easy to differentiate between what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling because of the clarity of mind that comes with it. Now, on the 17th of July, we are now starting to move into this very tense period with the Sun opposing Pluto and both of those squaring the nodes. Now this is getting tighter and tighter. And on this date, 17th of July, we're going to have the new moon in Cancer, which will actually oppose Pluto. So Pluto at 29 Capricorn and the moon and sun at 24 Cancer. So this lunation is certainly going to trigger a lot of this material, this Pluto material that feels quite serious and quite intense. And the new moon in Cancer is a lunation that asks us to make some kind of fresh start, new start that is associated with home and family, the land that we live on, but also our safety and our feeling of belonging. And maybe it feels like that's under threat in some way because of Pluto being up there on that anaretic degree opposing us. It feels like maybe just all the stuff out there in the world feels like it's spinning out of control, and it's very hard to know what, if anything, we can do about it. So the new moon in Cancer kind of wants to hide away. It's almost like we're wanting to protect ourselves from all the stuff that's going on out there. But in some way, we need to process and to assimilate that there are things going on that we don't necessarily have control over, but we've still got to find our roots and stay connected to our roots and to know who our family are. And family, of course, can go beyond blood. Family is not just blood. So we've got to sort of maintain those connections, nurture those connections and nurture ourselves. And right on the back of this, the nodes then will change signs. So the North Node will enter Aries on the 17th of July and the South Node will enter Libra. I will be making a separate post on this particular transit, so there'll be more information coming about this. But just to set it in place here, where the North Node moves, we are asked to develop those qualities of the sign. So Aries, we need to be more independent. We need to be more active, more motivated, more willing to pioneer into new territory. We need to foster new beginnings of some kind. And we need to let go of South Node in Libra, injustice, inequality. Libra also with a South Node involvement can also speak of issues connected to codependency, unhealthy relationships. The positive, healthy relationships, the good connections, the good allies, we can take that all with us as we forge into new territory, Aries, as we get motivated to start again, to make some kind of fresh start. But letting go of unhealthy relationships, certainly with the South Node in Libra, that is something that we're doing collectively as well as personally. On the 20th of July, just a few days after the nodes change signs, we're going to have Mars opposite to Saturn. Now, this is a very interesting aspect that is catching my attention, not least because Mars is now the dispositor of the North Node in Aries, because Mars rules the sign Aries. And also because it already feels like we've got this really big karmic story going on with the Sun opposite to Pluto, both of them squaring the nodes, and that's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And now we've got Mars opposing Saturn, who is also known as the Lord of Karma. So we have some kind of opposition, some kind of action, desire, frustration, or anger, Mars, that is coming into confrontation with rules, with authorities. I have to say that given that Mars is in Virgo, this part of the chart, the collective sixth house, can be associated with the military. And my head is, sort of thinking back to Saturn in Pisces and the issue with the dam in Ukraine. So yes, it's possible there's something about the military actions around this time. Obviously, I don't know whose side and what's going on there, but just this feeling that there is something that is being frustrated, blocked, or stopped, or we're trying to do something about it, but there is some kind of limitation in our own personal lives. Often we can experience this aspect as things are not moving quick enough, or there is some kind of problem that is stopping us from achieving our objectives. And in many ways, often Saturn is saying, hey, you need to slow down a bit here. Take your time. Slow and steady wins the race. Again, you don't want to burn out. So Mars opposite Saturn is some kind of frustration that things are not moving quickly enough, but we have to respect the limits, or we have to respect the rules, we have to respect time itself. And then whilst this aspect is in play, on the 22nd of July, the sun will then activate, illuminate this huge pattern we have here with the sun opposite Pluto. It will be exact on the 22nd of July, and the sun squaring the nodes again exact on that same date. And all of them are on these anaretic degrees. Pluto 29 Capricorn, South Node 29 Libra, Sun 29 Cancer, North Node 29 Aries. So this is very potent. And again, I want to mention that what is going on around this time, I kind of feel is seeded around the new moon in Cancer on the 17th of July. Something perhaps occurs around this time, or there's just a feeling around this time. And then as we come to this peak point, things are illuminated. So the sun is illuminating Pluto. The spotlight is on massive change, Pluto, or destruction, Pluto, or the issues of power in society, in the authorities, in the governments. The spotlight is on these kinds of things. And it's also speaking of our own personal shadows. The sun can symbolize the self, one's identity. Pluto, the shadow, the underworld, the stuff that we don't see, the stuff that we push underneath the carpet, the stuff that is responsible for us demonizing one another. And this is how wars happen. We demonize one another. And this propensity of humans to demonize one another, to try to exorcise our fears out there, this is something that we have to resolve. We've got to find our center. We've got to find a compromise. We've got to find the middle ground. And this is karmic, because Pluto and the sun are laying in a square to the nodal axis. It's something really important that we've missed or just needs to get done so that we can release all of this potent, powerful, useful, constructive energy to help us to evolve. And if we want to be part of this movement, part of this evolution, then one of the best things we can be doing on an individual level is facing our fears. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean throwing yourself in the absolute deep end of something that you're completely terrified of and you're not ready for. But maybe a small fear, maybe something that you kind of think, actually, yes, I am ready to deal with this, to look this in the eye. It could be a big thing, small thing. It doesn't matter. As long as we are each allowing ourselves to look at our fears and to acknowledge our shadows. So the sun opposite to Pluto and squaring the nodes is an opportunity for us to reclaim some power that we've lost through being so scared of ourselves and one another. Now on the 23rd of July, this is when Venus stations retrograde in Leo, just as the sun moves into Leo. So we move into Leo season, and then we begin immediately this period of review. Again, I will be doing a video about this, so you'll get more information about this particular transit. But generally speaking, Venus retrograde in Leo is asking us to look at what makes you happy. That's going to be the main question. What makes you happy? How can you bring yourself back to your heart and what you truly love? How can you express more of that in your life? This is going to be important for Venus retrograde in Leo. The other thing that is important about this transit is that, as I was saying before, the nodes have just changed signs. So Venus now rules the south node. So this is where we're trying to get unstuck. So this retrograde of Venus through Leo and trying to get to the heart of everything, to really come back to our light and truly identify what draws us, what attracts us, what we love, and what is an expression of that love. All of this is part of understanding what we need to release, the kinds of relationships perhaps that we need to release, and as well shows us where we have something truly precious that is necessary for us to kind of make center stage. You know, there are some relationships or some things in life that we almost take for granted. They're just there. But when we have Leo energy, this is about putting it on a pedestal. It's about, putting it under the spotlight and really seeing it, really understanding this is of value to me, or this person is of value to me. This lifestyle, this pastime, whatever it is, this is of value to me. It is there for all to see in glorious light. So Venus retrograde in Leo is going to give us a lot of clues about what needs to happen as far as this evolutionary story is concerned with the nodes changing signs. Now, if that wasn't enough to keep you busy, we also have Chron stationing retrograde, also on the 23rd of July. Honestly, there's so much going on this date. Stick a note on your calendar, because with Venus stationing retrograde and Chiron stationing retrograde, so we've got two planets stationing, often the station days themselves can feel a little wobbly. I always say this, but it is worth repeating, because I think sometimes we kind of forget that the actual date of stationing, that includes stationing retrograde and stationing direct, they're confusing because we don't know whether we're going backwards or forwards. So there is a natural sense of a wobble. What is going on here? I don't know quite what's happening. It's like I need to take a step back to figure out what is happening. Now, Chiron stationing retrograde, of course, this happens every year. And this is, like with every retrograde period, an opportunity to internalize the energy concerned. So we're already internalizing Venus's heart-led energy, which is all about our relationships and what we value. So now we're on an internal journey to explore those things. And now with Chiron stationing retrograde, we are internalizing this energy to explore those wounds, to look at what has not been dealt with. Some wound, some pain, some hurt needs to be cleared out. It needs to be cleansed. It needs to be tended to. There's something perhaps that we've ignored and it's affecting our motivation, Aries, or our sense of passion, or our energy levels, just simply our energy levels. Sometimes, of course, physical pain and physical problems, they are always going to manifest as a drain on our energy, because if you're in pain, all your energy is going towards dealing with that physical pain. But emotional pain too can work like that. If there's something going on inside that we don't want to look at, we're trying to be strong, Aries, I'm trying to be strong, I'm going to put on a brave face, and yet something inside of you feels like it's dying, or something inside of you feels so broken, so hurt. And it's incredible how much that can drain your batteries. So Chiron going retrograde is saying this is the time to really start to look at some of that pain that you've been putting a brave face on it, but actually it needs to be addressed now. You need to look at it now. And during this retrograde period, we will find ways to either heal that pain, fully heal it, solve the problem, or find a way to live with the scars, to live with what has happened, to what has occurred, and to find a way to accept that situation so that we're not draining our battery, draining our energies all the time. On the 27th of July, Pluto is going to move off that anaretic degree of Capricorn, but on the 28th of July, Pluto will then perfect its square to the nodes. So again, a square to the nodes means that there is some kind of missed step. Some kind of deconstruction or deconditioning needs to happen with Pluto in Capricorn. It is also about erasing limitation or getting rid of certain frameworks and structures that are not working for us. It's also, once again, addressing power issues, power dynamics. So something here needs to shift. We need to face that scary thing so that we can evolve and again, reclaim that power. It's the same story that's being kind of reiterated right through July. The final aspect of the month, also on the 28th of July, will be Mercury's entry into Virgo. And this is going to be important because Mercury is going to have a retrograde whilst it's in Virgo, which means it's going to be in Virgo right up until October, the beginning of October, around the 4th. So this is a long period of time for Mercury to be in one sign. It is, of course, the sign that it rules. So sometimes Mercury retrograde in Virgo or Mercury retrograde in Gemini, because Mercury rules Gemini as well, they can be a little less problematic than some of the other retrogrades just because Mercury is happy in this sign. But still, as Mercury moves into Virgo, we are now shifting our thinking towards, once again, how can I make things better? Remember, Mars is already here wanting to take action, to burn the candle at both ends, to get things done, to hone those skills. And now Mercury is preoccupied. The mind is preoccupied with these kinds of themes. And it's very important that we pay attention to the details, because as we move forwards, as Mercury moves forwards, he is then going to move backwards. So we're going to have to eventually go over some of these details again. So it's really about paying attention to what is happening, particularly on a day-to-day level. As Mercury moves into Virgo, it could be really useful to start thinking about, maybe making a few notes about how things could change within your routine or within your work or with how you serve and show up in the world. Making a few notes now will mean that you've got something to work with during the Mercury retrograde period, or something at least to start you off when we come to the Mercury retrograde in Virgo. So this is a very busy month, as you can hear. A lot of really big stories in play that have this vibe of karma or destiny at work. And sometimes I think when we have these kinds of energies at work, it's easy to get overwhelmed and to feel ungrounded. So during this time, as much as you can, just keep trying to remember the ground beneath your feet. Remember, Jupiter is going through Taurus at the moment. So remember the ground beneath your feet. Visualize yourself connected. When you lay down and go to sleep at night, or if you're laying on the sofa, take a few moments just to imagine that you are being cradled by the earth beneath you, and that will help you to feel more grounded and more present and less overwhelmed by all the stuff that is going on out there in the world. This brings me to the end of this reading. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, click a like and subscribe. And if you would like to hear more from me and support this channel, I do have a Patreon. I will leave the link below. In the meantime, I wish you many blessings on your path.